Hey, it's Anna here. I wanted to have a story conversation with you guys about my spiritual journey so far. And I'm not really one to enjoy talking about myself, but I've really come to embrace and really realize that when I heard of other people's stories and other women that have gone before me and what they have experienced, it really helped me personally to not only understand that, hey, what I'm going through is normal. It is something that is okay, and it is something that I can embrace, accept, and kind of move through. And I just think the power of stories is incredible. And hopefully, by sharing my words and what I have been through, maybe it can bring you some comfort in one way, shape, or form. So, my story began a long time ago, many years ago. But in terms of your spiritual awakening, I do think that sometimes it can be a moment that, hey, something just turns on and you can't turn it off anymore, or something turns on a little bit, you do a little bit of work, but then maybe things get overwhelming and you could shut it down as well, and it comes back on and off, or it's just on and you can't ignore it anymore. But I do believe that there will come a point in time in each of our lives where there's just something inside that feels that it's bubbling, it's brewing. It just needs to sort of come out, whether it's your voice, whether it's thoughts, whether it's ways of being, whether it's to let yourself be you. And I think we're coming to a time where that is harder to ignore or suppress. And I do believe that we live in times where this idea that you can let yourself be you is becoming more and more accepted and celebrated. And we have the opportunity to do that now versus when you think about human history for the last like 2, 3 thousand years. A lot of us were either persecuted in the past when we spoke out or spoke our truth. It was incredibly difficult. And now it's so different. It's such a beautiful phase in a way where we live, where many of us have this opportunity to speak our truth. So I think that once something triggers in you, that you just have to be you, have to let your true self out. Or if you don't remember who you were, which is kind of the category that I fall into. From your childhood, maybe you've had the childhood where you were allowed to express yourself and say all the things. Mine was a little bit more reserved, more shy, more the kind where I had to be in a certain container. It was not a terrible childhood by any means, but it was one where I had to mold myself. And, that molding, that's what I've learned to do throughout my life. So, in December of 2020, there was a beautiful solar eclipse, and that was my moment where I'm like, that's it. That was my it's enough moment where it's like, okay, let's figure this out because there's something inside, there's this more, this idea of more, this can't be it, that was brewing and popping up in my thoughts, and like, this cannot be how I live my life. And by that, I'm talking for me personally. It manifested in a way that ever since I could remember, I had this undercurrent of sadness. I I always found it extremely hard to be truly deeply, like have joy and happiness come from within me versus expressing it as a glimpse of an emotion here and there. And I said to myself, I am so freaking tired of being unhappy, of being tired, of being miserable, of being just unwell. And I said to myself, I want to be happy. I want to be happy in moving in my day all the time. I want that to be my default. So that's what sparked my journey and what propelled me. And of course, that also meant that, okay, well, how do I go from being in this state of sadness to being happy? And I had to really, one of the first things that always comes up, it's almost like an inevitable part of anyone's awakening. The first thing you're going to try to figure out is this idea of, who am I? Who am I? What am I made of? What do I really like? What don't I like? And maybe you're part of the fortunate few to be really in tune with you and yourself and what you like and what you don't like, how your body feels when you do certain things, when you eat certain ways, or even different situations. Or you may be part of the few that you're just operating strictly on conditioning. And that was me. I was operating on conditioning. I had no idea who necessarily I was. I didn't know what was me, what was my conditioning, what was me trying to conform to society. It was just a big jumbled mess. So to unpack these layers was a process. And I think eventually you do come to a place where you finally can embody it and feel you. But it is a process because we're not necessarily taught how to go through it. And we're not necessarily always taught that who we are is okay. Maybe you've told that, hey, you're too much, you're too loud, you're too this, or you're too that. It doesn't matter what that too is. That leaves an imprint as you grow up, right? You feel, hey, that's still part of me, but I'm not allowed to show it. And I think many of us have our own versions of what that feels like. So this brought me to this next phase where it's all about information gathering. Everything from, I know I dabbled into astrology and human design and gene keys and numerology, even the Mayan calendar. All of it was super fascinating, and all of it gave me a lot of clues as to who I was. And I could slowly unpack and be like, okay, yes, this feels true. No, this doesn't feel true to me. And this comparing and contrasting, this world of polarity that we live in is extremely helpful in these situations because you can feel what feels like it is you. So if someone says, oh, well, you are, I don't know, I'm just going to pick a character trait here, like randomly, like, oh, you are the type of person that really thrives in multitasking. Well, if whether it's through school or through your work career so far, every time you've tried to multitask, projects spectacularly failed, then you know that does not feel true to you. You could just feel inside because you know if it works for you or not. Or meanwhile, you could be the type of person that, multitasking is your jam. Anytime you open your cupboard door and looked in your pantry and grabbed ingredients and put them together, you ended up with amazing dishes versus following somebody else's recipe, which felt like flat and boring. So you know yourself. It's like, oh yeah, I do. Like when you look at examples, I do feel really good when I'm allowed to, put my own dish together versus following a strict recipe. There's a difference in feelings in there. And that's what this information gathering was all about for me. It was a good compare and contrast, and a lot of things came out very congruently, oddly enough. You would think that there's bound to be something that is, out there or not accurate or whatnot. But most of it, the energies, when you try to describe sometimes feelings and energies, or the best one is when you try to explain to somebody your dreams, you can never quite find the right words to truly express what it was that you were seeing and the feelings you got out of that dream. So it's kind of the same way sometimes, right? It's the same way when you try to describe who am I, right? You kind of know, but you can't, it's hard to put into words all the time. So this led me to doing a lot of what you might know as shadow work. And Carl Jung described this idea of shadow work as being the parts of you that you either deny, don't accept, refuse to acknowledge, the parts of you that are, that the ugly parts that are there. They're still you. They're there to protect you in one way, shape, or form. But they're the parts that we just are not comfortable dealing with. They're the parts that we've been told are bad or it's something to be feared. So I did a lot. I had to really go and look at all the parts of me that were either the ones that I was ashamed of or didn't matter. And it was incredibly liberating because each time you unpack something and look at a shadow pattern that you have that is influencing you in your day, you just become lighter and lighter and lighter. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, you know, maybe you are dealing with extreme shyness. And for you to approach somebody and just to say hello is very difficult because you're kind of putting yourself out there. Well, diving deep into that. Why? Why am I shy? Why am I fearful of saying hi? Is it fear of rejection? Is it fear of they're going to think I'm crazy? Whatever comes up, that's just the surface level. But as you dig deeper and you start unpacking, what exactly is it that is influencing you to every time you want to say hi, even to, let's say, the cashier at the grocery store as you're paying for your food, even just to say hi there, some people have trouble with. And unpacking that, and once you realize what exactly is happening in your mind and in your body, in your emotional body, you can feel lighter, like this weight is lifted, because now when you bring consciousness to something that's affecting your decision making, you could see it so clearly and you could understand. And that is so incredibly powerful to know why you're doing certain things. And so shadow work has become a huge part of what I do every day, every day. And it is amazing how much better you feel just in your body and your confidence and the way and your ability to make decisions that maybe once scared the crap out of you. Now you have that courage and that power to perhaps make them and follow through with it. And so it is quite amazing. So I do want to touch on something a little bit, I suppose, that we all struggle with, especially in these times, and that's the issue of time. And when I started really diving deep into this, I did not have time to really sit down and meditate anytime I wanted. It had to be very much so pre-planned and well thought out. And that's because, well, we had the lockdowns, we had the kids learning from home, and it was incredibly difficult to be able to work and be, in essence, sometimes secretary to the children as they're doing their work at home and still doing all the things, making sure there's food on the table, keeping the house somewhat clean or tidy. Needless to say, it was an incredibly difficult time for many, 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 many of us. And time-wise, there was not a lot of it. So what I started doing is, meditation is amazing, and I did make sure to make some time, a few times here and there a week. The way I started, honestly, to add meditation to my day was my oldest still loves it when I stay with him. And I said, well, if I'm going to stay with you, I'm putting on a meditation. So I would put on like a 10 to 20 minute meditation max, and we would do it together. And by the time I was done, he was asleep and I got my meditation in. So I was super happy that that worked out that way. But it took me a long time to realize that maybe I could do that. Because at first I'm like, well, am I going to do it after? But after they go to bed, there's usually a couple of chores that you need to do to prep for the next day. There's going to be so late. And it was just one of those working out the excuses. And it just popped up as an option. Now, during the day, so I was telling you, I do a lot of like inquiry and shadow work. And to me, during the day, because you don't always, like, if you have sometimes 2-3 minutes in between moving different tasks, especially when the kids were home and you're trying to do your job and care for them and assist them with their school, what worked for me was contemplation, because you do it so naturally, especially as you do repetitive tasks in your day. And I'm going to give you an example that I am willing to bet you have experienced contemplation in your daily life. And that is, there's a certain place where I believe everybody experiences the power of contemplation. And that is in the shower. Right? Because I guess we all have a certain way that we move through our shower routine. There's just something automatic, and the mind is able to bring in a question perhaps that is bothering us, or something you want to unpack and dig deeper in. It could be something as simple as, hey, maybe you're having, most of us do it in the context of work, or a problem in life. So, hey, I'm having an issue at work with this, or I need to prepare for a presentation, and you try to get yourself in a good state of mind and how you would give it, or maybe you're practicing deliver it, or maybe something comes. And it's like this nice blend of mind working with your intuition and working together. It's not quite like meditation where the mind is set aside. It's not quite like being in a completely awakened state and it's just mind that's coming up. It's this beautiful blend of the two. So next time, think of your shower and how you did that. So things like doing the dishes, folding laundry, even walking, whether maybe you walk your kids to school and you walk back. Take those like 2-3 minutes. You could literally do it in such a short amount of time. And that's what I took advantage of, because I realized that very quickly those are going to be my moments during the day to be able to do any kind of work and unpacking that I wanted to do, and really sink into perhaps some of this information, because you're going to be in a bit of an information gathering, and that's certainly where I was. And just to breathe through that a little bit, let it sink in, play around with that, see what it means to me, what it feels to me. Contemplation is something that was extremely helpful to me. So, the other big thing that happens and that has happened to me is this idea of questioning how you live your life, what can change. And sometimes it's not about changing everything in your life, because I could tell you that my life today is not drastically different than it was even a year or 2 years ago, when I was really unhappy, especially with COVID highlighted a lot of things that were not working for me anymore. And I can't say that my life is extremely different. I still have my husband with me. We still have our home. We still have the 2 kids that are going to school. My routine, we still have to get the kids ready in the morning. We still have to get them out. I still have to go pick them up and get them after school, put them to bed, feed them. Like, the routine itself and the day-to-day has not changed drastically. But what has changed a lot is my attitude underneath it. And everything I do now has a little bit more oomph, more sparkle, more happiness. I do it because I understand who I am, and I'm able to set better boundaries. And it could be something as simple as, I had this conversation with my husband that sometimes I would make a meal and I would make enough for 2 days. I do eat very differently now that I am doing my bodybuilding. So my meals are pre-made, like for the whole week I have it ready. But when I make meals for the rest of the family, sometimes they will eat everything in one sitting. Meanwhile, I know I left over, and there's leftovers on the plate. We didn't finish them all, and now I still have to cook the next day because they did not intuitively leave enough for them to have the next day. So I said, well, that's a little bit frustrating, because I make sure that there's at least 2 meals. And so it's kind of coming up with like different strategies now. It's easier to voice what you're happy with, what you're unhappy with, and not in a way that is criticism. Because in the past, I could tell you 100%, if I were to say that to my husband, he would take it as like, oh, well, you're criticizing, blah, 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 like blah, blah, right? Like all sorts of his baggage would come up. Now it's like, okay, well, do we need to readjust portion sizes? Do I need to make even more? Do we need to just literally split it in half, put in a container what's for tomorrow, and keep out what's today? Right? So now it's more like solution based to see, okay, this helps me, because then I could only cook once and then have food for the next day. So it's this dynamic. I could tell you, because I am in a better place, it would not have been able to happen quite this smoothly a year ago, when it was more of an accusatory tone, where it was more of a complaining tone, that like, what the heck, versus, hey, this is really bothering me. I like to be able to cook once and eat for 2 days, or be able to cook every other day. This is what I'm finding. Can we do this? Can we do that? And that just comes out naturally now, which is honestly the biggest gift I could have given myself. This idea of getting to a place where I know who I am, I'm comfortable with who I am, I can stand in my own power, I can voice what I need to voice in different circumstances and situations. And the idea also of weaving together how to move through obstacles and move through challenges and make my reality be shaped in a way that I feel good being here. I feel good in my body. I feel good with all the things that are happening in my life. I want to share the tool that for me personally brought everything together. And I really believe each one of us we're the same, but we're so different. We're going to be drawn to different modalities. I have seen some brilliant astrologers, and that is their world. I have seen people that are amazing at Reiki, and that is their world. And just all sorts of modalities, there's no lack of them, and I think they're all resurfacing. So I say that because while this one is one that felt good and one that I really meshed well with, it may not be yours, and that's totally fine, but I just want to put it out there because it is what helped me through this path and through this journey and navigating all the things. And that is when I learned to read the Akashic Records. For me, it really was a shortcut to making a lot of these things happen and happen faster. And by that I mean because in the records, it's really neutral information. So a quick description of perhaps what they are. I'll have a more in-depth video on this because I think it's really warranted to dive a little bit more deeply. But it's basically an energetic place in spirit where all information of your soul and its choices and everything it has gone through is stored. So it's an amazing place to go and access traits, characteristics about how your soul was built, because it gives us an invaluable amount of clues and traits that we can then feel into. Is that right? Is that me? Is that not me? And compare and contrast. And I'll tell you from my experience and everything else, every personality test, when I read my astrology chart and all sorts of other modalities, the fabric of who I am really was brought together when I looked into my Akashic Records. And it was a beautiful way to have it all make sense to me. And because it holds information about your soul, it was an amazing shortcut to me as well to hop in there and kind of look at what energies are blocking me from doing a certain thing or why I'm feeling a certain way about something. And it just helps to unpack that shadow work a little bit more, with a little bit more ease. I'll say that. So for me, that is an incredible tool that I love to use in my everyday life. So this whole idea of spirituality and what it has come to mean to me, it's not just spending time meditating as much as you can and being in that world, although it is a beautiful world, the inner world, once you go in and I tell me if you've had these experiences, but sometimes you just don't want to leave. It's amazing inside your head sometimes. But ultimately we are physical beings. We do have this life that we need to live. And to me, spirituality has really become this idea of looking at all parts of me, the good parts, the divine parts, the shadow parts, the parts that I love, the parts that are like, ugh, that are still a little bit icky, the parts that just are snappy, all parts, looking at everything from my body, my emotional and mental bodies, and my spirituality, and aligning that in a way that feels good to me so that I can make decisions in my day that feel good. And that's what's ultimately allowing me to be in my joy and feel free and powerful in who I am. So it is really a never-ending journey. And I say that because it's beautiful in all the amount of things that are to explore. And once you do open yourself to this possibility, of a different way of doing things, a different way of moving through your, what I'm going to say this word, but, and I don't know if it's going to be triggering or not, but moving through the mundane of life, this mundane piece where you have to do your repetitive tasks or whatnot, it could still be done in a way that still feels good to you, right? So that is my experience with my spirituality so far. And I would love for you to stick around and be on this journey with me, because there is so much to explore. There's so much to talk about. And there's so much to sort of live through and embody and have fun with. So I would love to hear your own stories. And how did you have this moment in time where it just like boop turned on, or was it more of a gradual process? What your favorite thing is about your spiritual journey. I would love to know. Hop in the comments and tell me your story. Bye for now.